In Israel, authorities held a conference for planning the establishment of illegal settlements in Gaza and forcing the displacement of Gazans. In France, Interior Minister Gerald Darmanin announced the deployment of at least 15,000 police officers to deal with the farmers' protest. And in Argentina, firefighters face a forest fire that has already affected more than 1,000 hectares in Dos Alerces National Park and other areas in the province of Chubut. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the TeleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Israel, authorities on Sunday held a conference in Tel Aviv with the aim of planning the establishment of illegal settlements in Gaza and forcing the displacement of Palestinians as a solution for Israelis to resettle in the Strip. In this context, Israeli government ministers and members of parliament participated in the so-called Return to Gaza meeting. In this context, the far-right Israeli Minister of National Security, Itamar Ben-Gvir, called for the voluntary migration of the Palestinians and the removal of the Israeli settlements in the Gaza Strip. For his part, he proposed that the Palestinians in Gaza should go to Iraq, Qatar, or Turkey. At the same time, the Israeli minister added that the voluntary transfer of Gaza is the solution. In Palestine, local media highlighted that on Monday, dozens of civilians were killed by Israeli bombardments on the Gaza Strip in the 115th day of total siege on the population. In this regard, during the early hours, several people were killed by bombs dropped on 5 houses in the neighborhood of Rimal in the northern city of Gaza. In addition, according to the Wafa news agency, 10 people also were killed after an Israeli attack on a school run by the United Nations Refugee Agency, Palestine. Meanwhile, the military continued the siege for the 8th day of the Nasser and Al-Amal hospitals, located in the southern city of Han Yunis, epicenter of the Israeli ground offensive. Palestinians continue to face a severe humanitarian crisis on the 115th day of the Israeli siege, while shelling continues to intensify from the south to the north, all this with the recent cut in funding to the UN. Our correspondent Nur Harasin brings us the details.
10 countries have cut the funds on the UN. At the same time, Israeli protesters every day do start their protests on Karm Abu Salem border between Gaza and Israel to stop actually the humanitarian aid from entering Gaza, and in many occasions they actually succeeded in that. And this all of this is coming while the Palestinians on the ground are struggling, they are suffering, they are in need of every little possible humanitarian aid, if it's water, food, blankets, medicine, clothes. During this winter, they are in need of every little humanitarian aid possible. However, reading what is happening here on the ground in Gaza, it looks like the Palestinians will be welcoming very bad days, more struggles to add to their own struggles in the light of the funds cut on the UNRWA. At the same time, talking about the highlights of what is happening here on the ground in Gaza, intensive battles in Khan Yunis and also Gaza City. Eyewitnesses said that the past 12 hours overnight were very close to the very first days of the Israeli war in Gaza. And this is just to show and explain how intense the night was. Hundreds of Israeli strikes hit Gaza City and also Middle Gaza, Khan Yunis and Al-Nusayrat refugee camp. According to the Palestinian Health Ministry, 40 Palestinians were killed only in the past 12 hours, only over night, in a series of Israeli attacks on the Gaza Strip from its north to its south. Nur Harasin, TeleSUR, Gaza.
And more than 60 Palestinian journalists have been imprisoned by Israel since the beginning of the bombardment of Gaza on October 7th. 61 Palestinian journalists are being held in Israeli jails. 15 were arrested in the first 8 months of 2023, and another 46 after the beginning of the total siege on Gaza. Most of those arrested are from the occupied West Bank, and most of them are under administrative arrest, a measure by which Israel arrests without formal charges or a trial date, so it is not known when their imprisonment will end. According to the Union of Palestinian Journalists, Israel is implementing a campaign of repression against journalists who seek to report on the situation in the Gaza Strip. In South Africa, activists and press workers held a vigil in solidarity with Palestinian journalists. Around 200 people participated in the activity on Sunday afternoon in front of the St. George Cathedral in Cape Town. The people lighted candles in honor of the journalists killed by Israel in the Gaza Strip and placed posters with their faces on the outside of the cathedral. The Palestinian Journalists Union reported that since last October 7th, Israel has killed 113 journalists and media workers. Similar vigils were held in Johannesburg, Makhanda, and Durban. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called for renewed funding for the Palestinian Refugee Agency amid a smear campaign by Israel. The UN chief strongly appealed to the governments that have suspended their contributions to at least ensure the continuity of UNRWA's operations. A dozen countries, including the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, and Italy, announced that they are suspending funding to UNRWA because of the alleged involvement of its employees in the October 7th attack launched by the Hamas movement against Israel. Of the 12 allegedly involved, 9 were identified and immediately dismissed by UNRWA Commissioner General Philip Lazzarini, while 1 is confirmed dead and the identity of the other 2 is being clarified. Stops, the crisis that the region currently experiences would reach a point of no return.
If this aid to the Gaza Strip is stopped, this will obviously trigger a famine here in Gaza. Imagine if with the little aid that was already coming, people could barely get their daily food. I believe that if this order is executed, Palestine would enter into a real famine. We hope that this does not happen, and that this order is not executed because it would be a real catastrophe for the Gaza Strip.
And in the West Bank, over 6,300 Palestinians have been detained since the start of the Israeli siege against Gaza on October 7, 2023. A committee that groups prisoners and former prisoners, together with the Palestinian Prisoners Club, have said that hundreds of the detainees are minors and that about 200 of them are women. These groups have denounced that the Israeli occupation forces subject the prisoners to torture, beatings, threats, and other physical and psychological mistreatment. They note that since the start of the aggression, the Israeli forces have issued some 2,856 administrative detention orders, which is a violation of human rights, for it allows them to hold Palestinians without due process for up to 6 months, without giving them the right to present evidence or a defense. On Sunday, the Arab League held an extraordinary session to discuss measures taken by the International Court of Justice against the government of Israel. The session was convened at the request of the State of Palestine and in coordination with Egypt and Jordan. The primary objective of the meeting was to formulate a unified Arab stance in response to the recent measures issued by the ICJ against Israel. The top court ruled on provisional measures that Israel must implement and adhere to based on a case brought forth by South Africa. The case accuses Israel of failing to fulfill its obligations under the 1948 Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. The meeting aims to take comprehensive measures to prevent prohibited acts under the Genocide Convention, ensure the immediate provision of urgent humanitarian needs for the Gaza Strip, and hold Israel accountable for incitement to genocide in Gaza. Let's take now a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. Well, the stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back from the south. In Niger, hundreds of people took to the streets in celebration of the announcement of withdrawal of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger from ECOWAS. On Sunday, the leaders of the 3 Sahel nations issued a statement in which they affirmed that ECOWAS had become a threat to the states and that the withdrawal was a sovereign decision. In the face of this decision, citizens of Niger celebrated the decision to leave ECOWAS which they describe as an instrument at the service of the French Empire. During the last few months, the three nations have strengthened their mutual cooperation and their positions in favor of the Alliance of Sahel States, which was formed with the objective of reinforcing military assistance against possible cases of aggression or armed rebellion. In Turkey, an armed attack inside a Catholic church left at least one person dead during Sunday Mass. The incident took place in Istanbul. According to authorities, two masked men burst into the church of Santa Maria, opening fire on the congregation. After the attack, the Turkish government authorities sent their condolences to the family of the deceased and announced the closing of the area in an attempt to apprehend the assailants. An investigation is currently underway to identify and arrest the perpetrators of the attack. In France, Interior Minister Gérald Darmanin announced the deployment of at least 15,000 police officers to deal with the farmers' protest. The forces will be strategically placed in different points of conflict, where it is foreseen that demonstrators will carry out blockades starting this Monday. According to local media, this Sunday, the preventive deployment of police officers was carried out in the vicinity of the international market of Rungis, the largest agricultural product market in Europe. At the heart of the farmers' discontent are low wages, inequalities in income distribution, the impact of inflation, bureaucracy, and European environmental standards, which they describe as too severe. In Argentina, firefighters face a forest fire that has already affected more than 1,000 hectares in Los Alerces National Park and other areas in the province of Chubut. More than 250 firefighters, who will be joined by another 123 in the next hours, are fighting the fire that broke out on Thursday. Mario Cardenas, head of the Fire, Communications and Emergencies Department of the park, reported that the fire is still active in all its sectors and that weather conditions are unfavorable due to high temperatures and strong winds. Authorities reported that they have the support of 2 water planes, an observer plane, and 2 helicopters to face the fire. Also in Ecuador, a forest fire has consumed around 250 hectares in the ecological reserve El Ángel in the province of Carchi, bordering Colombia. The fire started last Wednesday, and 170 members of several fire departments of Ecuador have been deployed to try to fight it. The Secretariat of Risk Management informed that so far the causes that started the flames in the buffer zone of the reserve are unknown. This fire is occurring at a time when neighboring Colombia has experienced a series of forest fires in several areas of that country. In Colombia, authorities confirmed a decrease in the number of active fires in the country, registering this Sunday at least 4 less outbreaks than the ones reported on Saturday. According to the National Unit for Disaster Risk Management, in the last hours, 23 forest fires have been extinguished in different areas of the country, allowing to control a total of 343 of these fires to date. The fire departments continue working to extinguish at least 14 fires that remain active and continue to affect forests and moorlands, mainly in the Andean region of the country. The most affected departments and where the fire outbreaks are still active are Boyacá, Huila, Córdoba, Magdalena, Vichada, and North Santander. In this context, Colombian President Gustavo Petro says he is scheduled to meet with Brazilian President Luis Inácio Lula da Silva to evaluate emergency plans in the face of the forest fires that could reach the Amazon. Petro made the announcement at a meeting at a unified command post where they talked about the El Niño weather pattern. Petro is concerned for what could happen in the area of the Amazon rainforest shared between the two countries should the wildfires that have broke in several areas of the Andes mountain range were to reach the Amazon. President Gustavo Petro said it is necessary to have a plan of action ready to face this possible scenario. We have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience, you can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with TeleSUR. For a short break, don't go away. Welcome back from the South. On Saturday, the President of Honduras, Xiomara Castro, highlighted the economic growth and the reduction of poverty in the country as a result of social policies aimed at vulnerable sectors. During the presentation of her message on the occasion of her 2 years in office, Castro highlighted her achievements, emphasizing the increase in the budget of all sectors. According to the Honduran president, this allowed to establish a real reduction of poverty in the country. In the presentation of her speech in the Suyapa Boulevard, social and political movements were present, before whom the president gave a speech thanking them for their struggle and her cabinet and team for their collaboration. Castro considered that she was on the right path in her administration and called on citizens to always defend the democratic system and the state of rights that have been consolidated in these 2 years.
With the highest economic growth, credits, and support for production in the countryside, we have put order in public finances and the state's single fund. We promoted the largest investment in infrastructure in history. We have increased the budget of all social sectors, education, health, security, and vulnerable groups.
The head of state, Xiomara Castro, rejected sanctions and blockades against the Honduran people.
We reject blockades, sanctions, and imperial interference against our people. We are in a zone of peace.
In Venezuela, the representative of the national government at the dialogue table with the opposition, Hector Rodriguez, emphasized that Caracas remains committed to dialogue despite conspiratorial attempts by the extreme right. On behalf of the government delegation, the governor of the state of Miranda rejected the reactions of the opposition after the decisions announced by the highest Venezuelan court regarding some disqualified opposition leaders. Furthermore, Rodriguez rejected the statements made by spokespersons of the U.S. State Department regarding the adoption of possible anti-Venezuelan measures after the decisions announced on Friday. In this regard, he assured that Washington was led into a trap by part of the opposition. He also ratified the disposition to continue dialogues in spite of the anti-democratic actions of a sector of the opposition.
In spite of all those efforts of the extremist sectors, of stateless sectors, for the attempts of coup d'etat, of assassination, to harm the economy, and the social policy of the Venezuelan people, the leadership of the revolution has never doubted that the path is democracy, that the path is dialogue, is debate, that the path is marked by the Bolivarian Constitution of Venezuela.
In addition, Rodriguez emphasized that during the dialogues it was established that only those candidates who comply with the laws will be able to participate in the presidential elections.
Chavez supporters, the force of the Bolivarian Revolution, do not have to solve the internal problems of the opposition. We presume that some actors may have made us understand something that was never discussed. Never dialogue, never, in any document, in any conversation of any candidate in particular. It was always discussed in general terms, and our opposition was clear. Those candidates who comply with Venezuelan law, as in any democracy, may freely participate in any of the upcoming electoral processes: presidential elections, governors, mayors, community councils.
The representative of the national government of Venezuela assured that the opposition has not fully honored the Barbados agreements.
In one key aspect, that the Barbados Agreement has not been fulfilled, and that is what puts it at risk, is the assassination attempt, because part of the Barbados Agreement is the absolute commitment to abandon violence, to abandon coup d'etat, to abandon assassination attempt as a way of doing politics. So those who assume the responsibility for the counterpart, for the opposition, before the dialogue, must say, as I recognize it, Gerald Blythe has said very clearly his absolute rejection of that way of doing politics, that violent way.
We have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. Also join us on our social media on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.